We live in an ever crazy, changing world, Dan, don't we?
Well, maybe you do. Seems pretty normal to me.
I'm Ben. I'm here with Dan. We are the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in Cornelius, North Carolina. We're here with Josh, our producer. And guys, you did a great job on the Trump assassination attempt and some of those the political things that you guys talked about the last two episodes.
Yeah, I think we pretty well demonstrated that we're not prophets, though. I mean, because
no, but you actually did say. You said by the time this airs, I don't believe that Joe Biden will be the nominee. You said that.
Yeah, I thought
that's pretty good, Dan.
I just did not see the complete and total collapse of even the pretense of a democratic process happening as rapidly as it did. Yeah. Because you got to admit, I mean, in my opinion, they should completely throw out the expensive, ridiculous primary system altogether. It meant absolutely nothing this year. It was a waste of millions and millions of dollars, and it was completely predetermined in both parties before you held the first primary.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a very honest question because one of the things you and I both know in leadership, you always have to think about decisions that you make that will lead to precedent. Okay, so if what's happening within the Democratic National Convention or party's happening, that hey, if your guy is losing so bad, just replace him. Is this a dangerous precedent to have? I mean, here's what I'm going to ask: is there a legal reasoning for this to say, "Oh yeah, this makes total sense," or is it saying, "No, there's something wrong with this process that this should be challenged legally"? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't know if they have any legal grounds on which to challenge it, but I just think it's. Well, but in all reality, the Democrats in particular have set up. It's been a faux process for years when they invented the superdelegates.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So it has really been. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when the conventions actually meant something. They didn't. They didn't do the roll call until Wednesday and Thursday nights. They, if it was like in '76, Trump was trying, or not Trump. Reagan was trying. Can't get him off my head.
He was still on the other side at that point.
He was still a Democrat in those days. No, when Reagan was trying to take out Ford, and it went down to they had this big floor demonstration for hours on a Wednesday night, and then in 1980 had the same thing on the Democrat side with Kennedy versus Carter.
Yeah,
and those were thrilling. It was like the Olympics. I mean, it was just awesome.
That was Dan loves that kind of stuff.
I'm serious. In 1976,
he loves political chaos.
I was a 15-year-old boy with a transistor radio at the Bill Rice Ranch, which we weren't allowed to have radios.
Love that.
And under my covers, listening to the Republican convention. When I was 15, I needed to get a life.
How do you feel now?
You're still the same person. I mean,
no, not as bad. Well, at this point, I'm just hopeless. I'm hopeless and cynical.
Yep.
Okay, so here's my honest question for after you guys, because this is one thing I don't think you talked about. Genuinely curious about your opinions on this. If Trump was assassinated, what do you think would have been the repercussions of that in a national sense?
I think minimally a lot of domestic terrorist incidents, like it would have really ramped up the level of like what we're seeing. I think we dodged a really, really kind of hairy situation by an inch.
I thought you were going to say dodged a bullet.
No,
I was going to say Donald.
He dodged.
We dodged.
We all dodged with him, basically. Really, really. It could have been so much worse, I think.
I agree with that, but I also believe that you would have had a DeSantis-Haley ticket that would have won in November.
Oh, really? So you don't. So what kind of chaos would have ensued? I'm just curious.
Oh, it would have been absolute chaos. It would have gone to the convention too. It would have, it would have gone. Because I mean, particularly it was so close to the convention. It would have just been. They probably would have delayed the convention. But
yeah, they would have had to delay it.
100% chaos.
I guess. So I've heard. The reason I asked that is I hear from some people that this would have caused civil war in our nation.
Not yet.
So it depends on what we mean by civil war. So we should be really careful about because when people talk about this, it sounds really crazy.
Yeah.
So years ago, I was listening to interviews by global civil war experts. Like there are people, I didn't know this before a long time ago,
that study actual civil wars.
Organizations that study every civil war going on in every country and every war, because they're always trying to find like patterns and try to figure out like what's going on. And so every country gets a rating every year on a, you know,
how close they are to a
it's like
civil
a
war?
1 to 20 scale or something like that on like kind of danger zone towards civil war. And none of them are like, the sky is falling, America's about to be like in the 1860s.
Yeah.
But they have been saying that we are closer to the wrong end of that spectrum than we have been in a long time.
Okay.
I don't think a civil war could occur unless there was a simultaneous economic collapse.
Oh,
which is why I don't worry overly about world wars, because our economies are so closely attached that the first person who, you know, lobs the bomb that leads to an inevitable, you know, global thermonuclear or world war of any kind is going to destroy their economy, and no economy is capable of surviving that on its own. Not even, I mean,
not even China. I mean,
China's in a lot. I just had dinner with a friend from China, and I got a lot of insight on that. We found out Russia is a complete paper dragon.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, they cannot even beat Ukraine. So why? But we also kind of knew that. And by the way, I think this is part of the American war machine industry that makes us think that, you know, we're always on the verge of being defeated. Remember when they kept talking about the elite Iranian force? Yeah. And they surrendered like in 90 hours, and they had, you know, wet themselves in the process. So and they were supposed to be the elite. Yeah. And so China is similar. China doesn't have military experience like we do. Well, not even close.
They have no. And economically, they're big.
They're 100% dependent upon us and Walmart and Target.
I've said this when I've talked to them about like my kids in the younger generation, because they might watch a TikTok of, oh my gosh, there's going to be a world war. I'm like, no, I promise you this. Everyone's economy is so dependent on each other. Yeah. There's never going to be another. If there is another world war, it will literally be the Great Reset. Which
is really important to learn as a principle, is that a lot of political energy is determined by the fear of the electorate, which is why you get this incessant diatribe from the Democrats right now on the existential threat to democracy. You want to know what an existential threat to democracy it is? Messing with the balance of power in this country as a republic between the three co-equal branches of the government. And yet last night, and this is being taped the night after Biden gave his address, he absolutely declared war on the Supreme Court, said we will reform it, we will change it. Not only that, if the Democrats get a majority in the Senate, they're going to eliminate 240 years of precedent with the supermajority that's required, the 60 votes, to be able to end cloture. If you mess with those two systems, any one party is now going to be able to exercise, or any one branch of government is going to be able to exercise almost a unilateral approach. We have checks and balances for a reason. We've had great Supreme Courts. We have had renegade Supreme Courts. We have had great Congresses. We have had horrible Congresses. We have had great presidents. We have had horrible presidents. But none of them could destroy the country because we had a balance of power. And I think even our Supreme Court, while it's advisedly conservative or irrefutably conservative right now.
They're constructionists.
Yeah, they're not going to let Donald Trump get into office and turn this place into a fascist dictatorship. It's not going to happen. And even if they were okay with it, Congress is not going to allow it. And so could we tone down the rhetoric just a tad? We are not going to be destroyed by either Biden or Harris or Trump. And if we are, we're toast anyway, because if any one person can bring down a nation like this, then...
Yeah, okay, so...
But they need our fear. They need our fear. Yeah. It creates money and power and conversation and clicks and likes and people turning into Fox and MSNBC.
Okay. So clarification question. If a bunch of people legitimately think that the political leader on the other side is an actual threat to democracy, what ought they do? Because the way a lot of people say is the way a lot of people talk is like, as soon as you say threat to democracy, you're like, basically, you could be culpable for inciting violence. And I was like, but I don't know what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. We don't have to do anything. We've got a system in place. We literally have a system in place. Every 2 years, we re-elect a majority of one house. You know, the Supreme Court can block it. and presidents in particular try to do this because nobody, particularly individuals, don't like to be told no. That's what Roosevelt was doing when he tried to pack and expand the Supreme Court. Now Biden's trying to do it again. And ultimately, it's getting rid of the electoral college. We got to get rid of electoral college. Well, you're going to need to go through a long and vigorous process called constitutional change. And when they can change and that's what the founders wanted. They wanted us not to go by impulse.
They want to go very slow change.
Which is why we have a Senate and a House. House is reactive, and Senate is proactive.
I think that here's the problem, Josh, is that we're getting to be more extreme in our views of each other. And so just like I know Democrats are viewing Trump as an existential threat, I think there's just as many Republicans or conservatives that look at Kamala Harris as the Antichrist as well.
Absolutely.
Both of them look at this and say, I mean, I remember in 1992 when Clinton was running and I'm in high school and you're hearing from people in the church, if he gets elected, it's the end of our country. And you're like, that was 32 years ago. Now, I'm not.
This is the most important election in America's history. Every 4 years,
the reason I brought it up is because I've heard that, especially from Christians that I know, that they believe that that God saved Donald Trump because he basically saved the country because it would have fallen into chaos. I don't believe that. I don't think you guys believe that. I think it would have. Well,
that was a definitely not. I don't know what look you thought you saw me, but it was
look at that on YouTube.
It was a definitely. I do not think that.
You don't think that? Okay, I don't think that either. That's just That's that. Okay.
He could have. God can do anything.
God can do anything. Okay, so I think we all agree that our nation was not going to fall apart if Donald Trump got assassinated. It would have caused chaos in some level.
Absolute chaos.
Okay.
It depends on how you define that. I don't think it would have been civil war.
No.
You think people would have got guns out?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Do you think that
but not very many of them. I think there would have been some.
And do you think the federal government would have come down on them like a bat out of you know where?
Well, I don't know what to think about even the Secret Service and what they're able to do right now. Like, I don't know what's real and true anymore. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, all they had to do is get on slopey roofs.
I'm safe. I'm on a slopey roof.
Clearly, that was a huge failure, and I can't believe it happened.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So here's my other question based on you said something, Dan, and you kind of went into it a little bit, but I want to kind of dig into because you mentioned something I think is a major issue for a lot of people and this is a transcendent issue. You talked about people being in leadership too long.
I said that.
Yeah, you talked about Biden being in leadership too long, and that
I'm on the podcast.
On the podcast. Yeah. Okay, so I want to bring that up because to me, that is a really important thing that people have to talk about because I think what a lot of people feel. I'm a Generation X person. All right. So what I'm in the middle of baby boomers and millennials that can't stand each other. And there seems to be this viewpoint of people, millennial generation and younger, that look at the older generation like you're in power too long and we don't like all these. And I think there's a legitimate issue of people staying in positions of authority and leadership too long. But how do you know when that has been too long? And this is kind of like a philosophical, but also very specific issues as well.
I think that's why EQ is as important as IQ.
But is it testable?
It's not. It's not.
What do you mean by EQ? If you've never heard that, is emotional
intelligence, self-awareness, being able to read the room. We don't know what happened in Delaware over the weekend or over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think there was a lot of coercion, bribery, pressure.
There's definitely a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that we I don't know if we'll ever become aware of it. There'll be books written about it in the future. I'm sure.
There will be.
At some level, it was a coup d'état. It was a bloodless coup. He had no option.
I mean, he was saying 2 weeks ago, only God himself could tell me.
Yeah. Well, apparently,
I think God
showed up
as Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi.
I mean, if all of your friends and all of your colleagues and everyone you've ever respected are all saying, please step down.
Yeah.
At some point, you got to look at your legacy and,
Yeah, I mean, and I honestly think when you can't climb the steps to your airplane anymore, that may be a sign that it is time to at least make a transition plan. But again, there's nothing so seductive as the essence of power. And I think when he ran, I think he thought, I'll be in here for 4 years, and I hand it over, and then it's like, ooh, I really like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you got Jill, who didn't want to, move back to Delaware, and his ear, and Hunter needing some help, and all these things. And then you always surround yourself with sycophants who are telling you what a wonderful, amazing person you are, because they don't want to lose their jobs.
Well, that's the thing to me is I think a good leader has to surround themselves with people that will tell the leader the truth.
Yes.
Yeah. And
because if you don't have that, you can live in this ivory tower, where there's just like, you think that, all of your advisors telling you, oh, no, this is great. Everything is great. And it's
I'm still convinced of this. He was pressured out not because they did not think he could no longer do the job.
I don't think they care about that.
He was pressured out because there was mounting evidence to say that he could not win.
Absolutely.
So and if he lost, it was going to cost him the House and the Senate and the ability to appoint Supreme Court justices. So I think that was really
yeah.
They're always playing the long game. It's always about raw, sheer, unadulterated power.
Yeah.
It is an industry. Yeah.
But just to piggyback on Ben's point, and just to kind of here's an example where you can kind of give a kudos to the other side, is I think you're absolutely right. Good leaders surround themselves with people who will tell them the truth. Something I've had to really work on, like with Eddie or I. And Biden was surrounded by people who were all telling him what he didn't want to hear. And that is not what's happening with President Trump. He has surrounded himself with only people that will tell him exactly what he wants to hear.
Right. Yep. And if you don't, then you're out. You're out, because he has he does not have traditional loyalty to his team.
Oh no, he's not loyal to anything.
Which is kind of interesting. The sheer and utter absence of Ivanka and her husband this election cycle says to me a whole lot, because they were in the inner circle. I don't think he's cut them out. I'm thinking they're afraid. I think they're afraid of their old man. I don't think they want to be identified with him. I think it's cost them too much personally and politically and financially.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So,
now I'm gossiping.
Yeah. Okay, but I want to deal with the principle, because let's just say you're part of a church and the pastor there, godly man, but he just seems he doesn't have the fastball.
I've seen this story so many times.
I know. So it's kind of like, what do you do in that situation?
Yeah. That's why you don't have the model that 95% of churches have, in my opinion. And that is, you've got to have a team of godly people around who ultimately respect the leadership and the authority of the office and the integrity of the individual, but who have an even greater loyalty to the unity of the body, the authority of the word, and the mission of the church.
Absolutely.
And so, but you also need to have a leader who has the self-awareness to say, I am on a runway that has an end, and I can either crash the plane off the end, or I can go to the hangar and bring a new plane out.
So let me ask you a question. I'm just kind of throwing out an idea here. Should there be, let's just say at some point where you and I are both 70 years old and we are in positions of leader, when should you have the conversation? I'm not saying you should retire at 70. Right? But I think that shouldn't you at least at the age of 70 begin having the conversations of okay, how do you want this to end? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm having those conversations right now.
I know you're having that because you actually care about people.
You're a good leader. We're not comparing anyone to you.
But I mean, I think that does go to EQ, but it also goes to ego.
Yeah. Yes.
And a lot of people don't want to let loose. I don't either. I mean, I'll ask you this question. What is Dan Burrell's biggest fear?
Irrelevance.
Yep. That's it. That's my biggest fear professionally. I mean, I got lots of other fears. Snakes would be number one. Irrelevance number two. But no, and I'm trying to sort through that. Somebody just told me this phrase. I don't know, maybe you, because you're so smart and helped me so many times.
Yes,
but
keep talking.
But it said, Dan, you have to realize that as you are now aging, you are in the process of giving up authority and trading it for influence. Well, that statement has really helped me to be able to see both the difference and give me a reason for getting out of bed when I'm in my 60s. However, I think it's a dangerous thing and this is what one of Biden's proposals is, that a Supreme Court justice has to retire at 80, which they do, by the way, do that for federal court justices. But they can still serve. Most people don't know that. They serve. They just don't serve in the full-time capacity. The chief judge can assign them cases.
Oh, okay.
And many of them work beyond 80, but it's their call, and it's the call of somebody else. So I would.
That's huge.
Yeah, I would. I don't think, and maybe I'm not the right person to answer this, I'd be in favor of a hard and fast rule, because I know people who are in their 60s who are losing it. And I will tell you this, if I need my books done, I'm calling my mom, and I'm sorry, Mom, 83. And she's sharper than I've ever been on my best day on that kind of. So but then again,
exception.
But here's the question, and I think this is a logical argument also, is just because you can, by and large, does that mean you should?
Right.
I mean, I think we've seen this, frankly, in Reagan's second term and in Biden's first term, in that there's pressures to that job that age you prematurely.
It ages you, absolutely.
And so you have to, people have used the term, it's almost like elder abuse. To some extent, it has been. And of course, then again, I got to wonder about someone who is so egotistically driven to think that they're the only person that can do this job, and they want it so bad that they're willing to, make everybody else suffer.
I just think that maybe this is only going to be a conversation that affects a small percentage of people, but I do think that if you're in leadership and you have this ability, you have to have, like you said, the awareness, the humility, the EQ, but I think also just I think some people stay in the authority, especially pastors, because they want the paycheck and they weren't prepared for retirement.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other story.
And to me, it's like
case.
You've got to do what's best for the church, and
the church needs to make sure that their pastors are either compensated well enough to prepare for the future, or they need to do that for them. Because they set themselves up for this kind of problem.
But I think also I would say this: if you are a young person and you see someone that's in position too maybe a little too long, do not don't play the Absalom game, because you will end up hurting yourself in the long run.
What do you mean by that, extrapolate?
Well, what I mean by that is Absalom didn't like his dad in charge, so he kind of won the hearts of men, had a coup. That never works out. It never works out. Allow the structure, just like in government, just allow the process to play out. And if you can't be under someone's authority because you feel like they've lost it and there's a compromised leadership structure, just go. But you don't have to be the one who stages the coup. It just never works out for anyone. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and I know we're out of time, but I want to argue out of the other side of my face on something I said. I'm not comfortable with the upper end limit. But I could make the case, and I could be convinced, because we do have an under. You have to be over 36.
You're right. You're exactly right.
And so I think a strong case could be made to say 36 to 74, 36 to 76. I don't know that it needs, again, if the only person to lead this country is a man in his 80s or a woman in his 80s, no. There's other people who can do it.
I agree.
I feel like we've all had those awkward Thanksgiving conversations with
where you told the same story to great grandpa
who can't carry on the conversation. But these guys are still older. It's like, what are we doing? It's like at some point,
I mean, we love them.
Yeah, we
love them. We want to honor them.
And we want to care for them. By not putting them in situations.
But eventually...
You get ready. We don't want to put them in situations where they hurt others. That's why you take their car keys away.
Well, and that's...
Or humiliate themselves.
Okay, so
the other thing, too, is it's undignified. Please spare me. Please spare me from those. One of the greatest preachers I ever heard, somebody I admired so much, they kept propping him up and putting him in chapel when I was in school. And one day he's up there, he's 83 years old, and halfway through, he has to pee. Because old men have to pee more often. He had to stop the service, excuse himself, leave and go to the bathroom and come back, dribbling. I'm sorry, but, and I don't want to remember him. And that was the last time I ever heard him preach. But you know what? I don't remember the passage, don't remember the scripture. I do remember the image.
Okay, we talked about a lot. I got that off my chest.
We didn't even have a topic this time. The first topic
It was Ben's questions about the last two episodes.
Ben walked in and said, "I've got questions for Dan and Josh."
Well, here's the thing. I honestly, I love listening to the podcast, even when I'm not here. And I when I was listening to it, I wish I could I wish I was part of the room.
Well, we wanted you here. We did want you here.
I was sick.
Yeah.
And one day I won't be here, Dan.
Don't remind us of that. Stop reminding us. Oh,
right.
That's elder abuse. Come on.
Heart.
I don't have many more of these episodes left. I want to be able to enjoy them. Okay.
Close us out.
This has been my special episode of Life Talks where I get to ask the questions of Dan and Josh. I hope this has been a fun conversation that you've got to listen in on. If you have questions, hey, we love to hear from you. LifeTalks@lifecharlotte.com. Send in your questions, your ideas, thoughts about episodes that you'd love to hear from us. Thanks again for listening to this episode of Life Talks. We'll talk to you next time.